is proposed by the member for Edmonton Centre, dealing with a 5-year planning freeze on new active treatment hospital beds. Yesterday, in the afternoon, the House spent its time discussing the Senatorial Selection Act, and tomorrow evening the House will be dealing with the energy estimates. At this stage, the House is dealing mainly with the Committee of Supply, trying to deal with the 1989-1990 provincial budget.
Let us pray. O Lord, grant us a daily awareness of the precious gift of life which you have given us. As members of this legislative assembly, we dedicate our lives anew to the service of our province and our country. Amen.
Introduction of visitors.
Minister of Economic Development and Trade.
Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasure today to introduce to you, sir, and through you to members of the Legislative Assembly, the Honorable Yuri Bonder, Minister of Local Industry of the Ukrainian Republic. Mr. Bonder and his delegation are in Edmonton to present the Ukrainian Trade and Cultural Show, which is being held in conjunction with the Klondike Days at Edmonton Northlands. Mr. Speaker, this event, as was indicated yesterday, is very significant in that it is the first time that the Ukrainian Republic has staged such an exhibition internationally. The choice of Alberta for the first exhibition reflects the importance of our shared cultural heritage with Ukraine. And Mr. Speaker, we believe that it will open up new and important links between the province of Alberta and the Ukrainian Republic. Mr. Speaker, our guests are in your gallery, sir, along with Dr. Horst Schmidt, our Commissioner General, and I would ask if they would rise to receive the very warm welcome of the Legislative Assembly.
Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 52, I wish to table the annual report of the Standing Committee on the Alberta Heritage Savings Trust Fund Act. Copies of this report will be delivered to each member as soon as publication is complete.
Notices of motions.
Member for Edmonton Millwoods.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to give oral notice under Section 40 to request, after question period and before the calling of orders of the day, unanimous consent to debate the following motion. Be it resolved that, in light of the extensive support provided by individual Albertans and development organizations to Nicaragua in the last 10 years, the Legislature extends its congratulations to the people of Nicaragua on the occasion of the 10th anniversary of the popular revolution that overthrew the Somoza dictatorship on July the 19th, 1979, and be it further resolved that this resolution be communicated by the Speaker of the Assembly to the Nicaraguan Ambassador to Canada.
When the communists go. Introduction of bills.
Provincial Treasurer.
Speaker, I request leave to introduce Bill number 10, the Financial Administration Amendment Act 1989. This is a money bill. Her Honor, the Honorable the Lieutenant Governor, having been informed of the contents of this bill, recommends the same to the Assembly. Mr. Speaker, essentially the elements of this bill, while improving the way in which the government manages and effectively controls the costs of our investment funds and our cash management strategies, there is one very important element of this bill that takes place every year, and that's the requirement under the Financial Administration Act to increase the debt limits of the province to $9.5 billion from the present level of $7.5 billion.
The Honourable Provincial Treasurer. Order, please. Order, please. The Honourable Provincial Treasurer has moved first reading of Bill number 10, Financial Administration Amendment Act 1989. Those in favour of first reading, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. Motion carries.
Bill number 10, Financial Administration Amendment Act 1989, introduced by the Honourable Mr. Johnston, is now read a first time. Tabling returns and reports.
Minister of Transportation and Utilities.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table the annual report of the Department of Transportation and Utilities for the year 1987-88.
Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to table with the Assembly 4 copies of the annual report of Alberta Hospitals and Medical Care for 1987-88, the statistical supplement of the Alberta Health Care Insurance Plan for 1987-88, and the annual report for Community and Occupational Health Department for 1987-88, and copies will be distributed to all members. In addition, I am pleased to file copies of the following audited financial statements: the Alberta Hospital Edmonton for the year ended March 31, 1989, the Charles Camsell Provincial General Hospital for the year ended March 31, 1989, the Foothills Provincial General Hospital for the year ended March 31, 1989, the Glen Rose Rehabilitation Hospital for the year ended March 31, 1989, and the University Hospitals Board for the year ended March 31, 1989.
Minister of Advanced Education.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to table copies of the annual report for the Lethbridge Community College 1987-88 and also the annual report for Fairview College for the same year.
Introduction of special guests.
Minister of Economic Development and Trade.
Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasure, sir, to introduce to you and through you to members of the Legislative Assembly both guests from the local area and from Toronto. And this pleasure is that much greater in view of the fact that they are parents of one of our outstanding pages. And I would ask Mr. and Mrs. Lee and their guests and family to rise so that we can extend to them the very warm welcome of this Legislative Assembly.
The member for Drumheller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my privilege and pleasure this afternoon to introduce to you and through you to all members of the Assembly a former page of this Assembly, Miss Cerise Chatalia, who is seated in your gallery and who has now gone on to join the legal profession in the practice of law in the city of Edmonton. I'll ask her to rise and to receive the courteous reception of the Assembly.
The Associate Minister of Agriculture.
Mr. Speaker, it is my pleasure to introduce to you and through you to the members of the legislature 4 ladies who are visiting our capital city and enjoying our legislature and our beautiful grounds. First, a constituent, Shirley Jorgensen. She is accompanied by Mrs. Aileen Young from Portage-la Prairie, Manitoba, and Mary and Margaret Parkhill from Ontario. I'd ask them to rise. They're seated in the members' gallery and receive the customary warm welcome of this Assembly.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Mr. Speaker, to the Treasurer. Mr. Speaker, Albertans already know that Peter Pocklington has $6 million of our money, that neither he nor the government will tell us what he's done with it. Mr. Speaker, Albertans also want to know how much of our $55 million loan guarantee Mr. Pocklington has already used. Mr. Speaker, but it turns out the question that Albertans really need answered is how much had he already used before we even gave him the guarantee. Mr. Speaker, records show that on the day the loan guarantee was approved, Gainers Incorporated had outstanding debentures with the Continental Bank of Canada worth $70 million, Mr. Speaker. Now, we believe that that guarantee may have covered part of these outstanding debts instead of financing expansion and job diversification and creation as the government had promised in their press release. My question to the Treasurer, Mr. Speaker, will the Treasurer admit that on the day the government approved the $55 million loan guarantee, the Continental Bank of Canada already held Gainers Incorporated debentures worth $70 million?
Mr. Speaker, presumably the amount of money which is on the balance sheet is a matter of record. I obviously can't confirm that statistic.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think if I was giving out money, I'd want to know what they owed, Mr. Speaker.
That's right.
But,
Hear, hear.
Mr. Speaker, my question then, and to the Treasurer more specifically, will the Treasurer tell us now whether or not the guarantee of March 3rd, 1988 had any relation to existing debentures issued by Gainers Incorporated to the Continental Bank over the previous 4 years?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Well, Mr. Speaker, then now the truth comes out, Mr. Speaker. In other words, that press release they put out was an absolute lie, Mr. Speaker. It had nothing to do with job creation. It had everything to do with bailing out gainers. Will they admit the truth now, Mr. Speaker?
Go for it.
Mr. Speaker, if we want to talk about what was done or what was happening, of course, that could be quite a debate in itself. But as we have said before, this is a straightforward process whereby the government guarantees a loan, and we have done that. There's nothing unusual about this. This is done all the time in normal corporate practices. And what we have done is just the member has outlined, and that's exactly the process we've talked about before.
Second main question, Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to designate my second question, member for Edmonton Avonmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Attorney General. Mr. Speaker, research done by the Institute of Law, Research and Reform here in Alberta in 1981 shows that 80% of ex-husbands have sufficient disposable funds to meet their support obligations, and that the main reasons for non-payment were continued feelings of bitterness over the marriage breakdown and a lack of a sense of responsibility for their children. My question to the Attorney General: in view of this research, how can the Minister justify collecting all monies in only 32.5% of cases and reporting that you cannot obtain blood or water from a stone?
Mr. Speaker, it's funny we have the same problem as we had yesterday, where they lead with erroneous information. The 3.2% was fully explained yesterday as to being just the people that are within the system that's being collected. There was people that, once they were getting full payments, have withdrawn from the system. There's people that never registered because they were getting complete payments. That's erroneous information. The second point is the report that's alluded to that was done by the Law Reform Commission was merely a survey not done scientifically, on an ad hoc basis, dropping in to see people that were on maintenance to gather data as a prelude to putting in the maintenance enforcement program, and was not to be taken as scientific data that you could compare from one year to another.
Mr. Speaker, in view of the Minister's inference that statistics are being manipulated and that withdrawal from the program equals success, will the Minister determine how many creditors have in fact withdrawn due to the frustration they experience and are pursuing the matter legally themselves?
Mr. Speaker, the program was set up to enable people who have a maintenance order to save them the cost of collecting and with a regulated system be more effective. and it has been effective. As explained again yesterday, there are many instances that are the cause of the problem is beyond the program itself. If a creditor cannot locate one of the debtors, or the program can't locate a debtor, or if that debtor happens to move to another province where we have reciprocal agreements, that is outside the control of this program. That program is there to collect maintenance from people who have the resources under legal orders, and it's effective. Obviously, there's going to be some people that aren't going to have collections finalized, but that is not due to lack of effort.
Mr. Speaker, the women of Alberta are not impressed. As the Minister has indicated that the maintenance enforcement officers' caseloads will be reduced to approximately 800 files, does the Minister actually consider that 800 cases is a manageable number for effective enforcement when 2/3 of them require active intervention?
Mr. Speaker, I don't know as to exactly what the ideal is. There are certain parameters we have to work with under. Since I've become minister, and that's all I can speak on this program, we have brought forward more money that has enabled us to increase the number of enforcement officers. We are realizing since January of 1987 there's been a doubling of the amount of money that has been received from the various debtors. I will continue to monitor this. I'll continue to work with the recommendations that have been made by the Alberta Women's Group, and hopefully we can improve the program. It's not the ideal, but it's certainly better than what was there.
Member for Edmonton Glengarry, followed by the member for Clover Bar.
Mr. Speaker, the process...
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, the process that the government employs to put men and women into positions of authority, boards and tribunals, has come under considerable criticism in the last few years. We've had a Conservative fundraiser organizer appointed as the head of the ALCB. We've had another high-profile Conservative and a neighbour appointed to the chairmanship of the Land Compensation Board. We now hear what we expected to hear, Mr. Speaker, and that is that the former member from Stettler is being considered for another high-profile position. Albertans are interested in the best men and the best women to serve in these positions of authority. My question to the Associate Minister of Agriculture is this: would she be prepared to table in this Assembly a description of the qualifications and the process by which she and the government are using to appoint the new chairman of the Alberta Hail and Crop Insurance Corporation, to satisfy Albertans that the process is fair?
Order.
Mr. Speaker, the process by which the chairmanship of the Alberta Hail and Crop Insurance chairmanship is made through the Minister and through Cabinet. I would be happy to discuss that with the member and with any other members at any time.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Premier. Would he be prepared to ensure that those positions, those high-profile positions, to be determined perhaps by a standing committee, that person, that man or that woman would be selected using a standing committee to help in the selection process?
Mr. Speaker, there are the odd occasions when a standing committee may be used, as for instance in the case of the Ombudsman or a provincial auditor, but clearly, Mr. Speaker, the government is elected to fulfill its responsibilities in the appointment of people. And I, for one, am very pleased that so many Albertans are prepared under a great deal of loss of time and energy and commitment to their personal work to serve the people of Alberta on boards and commissions in the way they do. Extremely pleased. Now, there's always judgment involved in these matters. Sometimes there's an ideal choice that is obvious, and you can move very quickly to appoint that person or select that person. Other times, you have to take into account the qualifications, the responsibilities, the geographical location of the need, and in some cases as well, there is a reason to have a national search. But all of these are a matter of judgment, in which case the government exercises a judgment and then appoints people. And I would say, Mr. Speaker, I find it pretty offensive on the part of the honourable member to single out the recent appointment of the president of the Alberta Liquor Control Board. That was a national search. That search was conducted by 5 people of the reduced number when it was isolated down to the last few choices. And those people were, in the case of Mr. Strain, 2 well-known Liberals, to my knowledge, and 3 public servants. Mr. Speaker, I had no idea that Mr. Strain had sought the job, nor had he ever raised it with me. And I find it offensive of the honourable member to select pick his selection now and try and point some type of innuendo at someone who is serving the people of Alberta.
Speaker, I wonder if the Premier could assure this Assembly that he hasn't made a deal with the former member from Stettler to pay him off for the services that he has given the government. Will he give us that assurance?
Again, Mr. Speaker, there's a certain cheapness about the question that the honourable member expresses. He casts an aspersion both on a former member of this legislature and on myself as a member of the government. I could say, Mr. Speaker, that Mr. Downey and myself have both said publicly that there was no agreement to any type of follow-up relationship. But I will say this as well. Brian Downey is a talented, capable Albertan with a great deal of interest in many matters in this province. And I believe that he has a great deal more to contribute to the people of Alberta, and I, for one, will look for opportunities for him to make that contribution.
Clover Bar, followed by Edmonton Millwoods. Clover Bar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is, Mr. Speaker, my question is directed to the Minister of Transportation and Utilities. Mr. Speaker, there are some very serious concerns, safety concerns, related to the intersections along Highway 14 within the Clover Bar constituency. The 23rd Street Avenue intersection, the Whitemud Freeway intersection, and the entrance to South Cooking Lake. The most critical one, Mr. Speaker, is the 23rd Avenue intersection where we have seen some recent fatalities as recent as last Saturday. To the Minister, will the Minister accelerate contemplated improvements to the 23rd Avenue intersection, 23rd Avenue and Highway 14 intersection to alleviate the escalating potential for loss of life?
Well, Mr. Speaker, 2 things I think I should point out with the utmost concern. Safety is a very, very significant feature and concern of mine. And the fact that we've had 2 recent tragic deaths at that intersection has caused me to ask the department to do a full review of what is occurring at that intersection and what we may be able to do, both in the short term and in the long term, to adjust and hopefully remove the possibility of that occurring in the future. 2 things I should point out, Mr. Speaker. The City of Edmonton is working on the extension of the Whitewood Freeway from 34th Street to their boundary at Highway 14, and those funds are available in the basic capital grants, and anything we can do to assist in that area will be done. After every fatal accident, there is an investigation team that go out and do a complete analysis of what has occurred and will make some recommendations to us, and I await those recommendations right now, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister has referred to the Whitemud Freeway intersection, and I have in my preamble as well. Will the Minister give some indication of what improvements are contemplated there and the time frame for such improvements, because it does impact on the 23rd Avenue intersection.
Mr. Speaker, I am aware that the city is presently in land acquisition for that particular site right now, and I'm not just exactly sure what the completion date would be.
Mr. Speaker, the third area of concern is related to the South Cooking Lake entrance, and I would ask the Minister if he would undertake to evaluate the requirement for streetlights at that intersection to increase the safety in that location.
Mr. Speaker, what I will do is take that as notice and certainly look at the traffic counts and the likes of that for the intersection at Cooking Lake turnoff, South Cooking Lake turnoff.
Edmonton Mill Woods, followed by Edmonton Meadowlark, then Calgary Fish Creek.
Mr. Speaker, recently in the House, the Minister of Culture and Multiculturalism said when we were talking about employment equity that he wasn't really sure what that was all about. So in my efforts to assist in the Minister's education, I'd like to refer to the Employment Equity Act that was passed by the federal government in 1986, that's 3 years ago, by the Conservative government, which said that employment equity means more than treating persons equally in the same way, but also requires special measures in the accommodation of differences. So I'd like to ask the Minister this afternoon, since his federal Conservative colleagues saw the need for employment equity legislation 3 years ago, can he tell us why he and his government are taking so long to see the light?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't know that we're taking a long time to see the light at all. As a matter of fact, employment equity provisions are in place in some aspects of the government, and I'm sure the Minister of Labour would be glad to explain some of those areas. In reference to the member's earlier question, he seemed to be heading towards an area of affirmative action, where I have some difficulties, as do most Albertans, realizing that now in the cold, hard light of day, some of the areas of affirmative action, in fact, turn out to be reverse discrimination. And I'm sure the member opposite would not be in favor of that.
It's discouraging how little support there is for fairness, Mr. Speaker, from this government. But let me just ask him this. Since the experience at the federal government and at other jurisdictions across this country at the provincial and municipal level have shown that you must have affirmative action, employment equity measures to achieve some measure of fairness. You have to have definite goals and timetables and measures that will accommodate that. Will the minister commit himself today to implement exactly those kind of measures in Alberta?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the commitment of the government is clear, that there is a commitment to fairness and equity of opportunity. That's what Canada's all about. That's why millions of people come to this country, because of the fairness and equity and availability of opportunities. If the member opposite is suggesting we do some strange things to make sure that certain individuals get certain jobs, that's not going to happen. But what we're going to do is make sure that all jobs, all opportunities are available to all people. That's the Canadian way, that's the Alberta way.
Mr. Speaker, since even this government's large business friends have endorsed the employment equity concept, including the Calgary Chamber of Commerce, will this minister tell us when he's going to take off his ideological blinkers here and introduce an Employment Equity Act that all Albertans can be proud of?
Well, Mr. Speaker, never. I'm not the Minister of Labour. I won't be introducing any Employment Act. I think the member opposite could figure that out. But let's just go back to the main thrust of the question, which is fairness and equality of opportunity. That's what we're here for, to provide fairness and equality of opportunity. And anybody could apply for any job for which they're qualified, but I again repeat, forcing people to accept certain jobs, forcing employers to hire certain people, is not fair. And if you want fairness, then that's what we're here for.
Edmonton Meadowlark. Edmonton, Minister of Labour, thank you.
Supplementary information. I was speaking with the Calgary Chamber of Commerce Subcommittee on Labour Relations less than a month ago, and the subject we discussed included employment equity. I would like to correct the record. They are not asking for legislation, and we should have that clearly answered. What they do encourage, and I think it's far-sighted of them, and it's one thing that we are working with as well, is to include in our programs and to assist the private sector in their programs for training because they recognize, and I think rightly so, that one of the challenges that is facing Albertans is the occupational segregation. So programs like Stepping Stones, which we have in place for young women and introducing them to occupational diversity, programs like the Equity Officer, which the Minister of Career and Employment and Development and Employment.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. That's sufficient listing programs on additional information on a supplementary. Edmonton Meadowlark, let's go. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Environment has lurched along to the creation of a makeshift environmental impact assessment process for the Athabasca Pulp Mill project. It is neither fish nor fowl, and it's very unlikely that it's going to have a great deal, that it's going to be able to evaluate with any effect the impact of this project on both these species, among others. Today we learned that we have an agreement with the federal government at the same time that we find that 2 more appointees to the Environmental Board for the Athabasca project have resigned in recognition of conflict of interest. To the Minister, does the Minister now understand that it is very important that his selections be based upon impartiality?
Mr. Speaker, the selections were based on the recommendations of the municipal jurisdictions, those jurisdictions that are closest to the people. With respect to the 2 individuals who resigned, they're good-thinking individuals. They're honest members of their community, hard-working members of their community. I asked them when I first met them, when I met them for the first time a week ago, and when I learned that 2 of them had expressed some opinion relative to the pulp mills, to examine their conscience, to get back to me within 4 or 5 days, and if they felt that in any way they were going to jeopardize the process, then do the right thing, and they did the right thing. They're good people, honest people.
So he appointed them, and then he assessed their impartiality. How will perhaps the Minister could give us some insight to how this board will work with, on the one hand, federal members appointed on the basis of strict regulations governing expertise and impartiality, and on the other hand, provincial members to this board appointed on the basis of ministerial whim without regard to depth of expertise and impartiality?
Well, I think that the Honourable Mr. Bouchard, the Federal Minister of the Environment, would take strong exception to that particular remark, because the selection of all the members was a joint process. In other words, the members were selected with the concurrence of the 2 ministers. And Mr. Bouchard has concurred completely with our choice of members, and we have concurred completely with his choice of ministers. And it's that kind of cooperation that's going to make this board work, and it's that kind of cooperation that hopefully will establish a model for environmental impact assessments in the future.
Mr. Bouchard concurred, but the appointees themselves didn't concur. Very interesting. I wonder if the Minister could tell us what criteria he is utilizing to select replacements for the provincial membership on this board, and can we have assurances that impartiality and depth of expertise will be at least 2 of the criteria that he will involve in that process?
Mr. Speaker, the board is in place. The board is in place, and the criteria for selecting the member to replace Mr. Hunter, who did resign, was that was outlined in the first place. That was the municipal jurisdiction recommended Mr. West, who happens to be the superintendent of schools in Athabasca. Again, a very hard-working, honest individual committed to the community. And that appointment was related to Mr. Bouchard, and Mr. Bouchard concurred. He said, "This appears to be the right man for the job." Simple as that.
Calgary Fish Creek, followed by Edmonton Calder, then Calgary Buffalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Alberta Teachers Association negotiators and Calgary Public School Board negotiators reportedly have decided to suspend their current negotiating sessions until September, Mr. Speaker. For those constituents who have expressed serious misgivings about this unfortunate suspension of negotiations, can the Minister of Education offer any rational explanation for this puzzling and casual approach to what obviously is an important round of negotiations with great implications for Calgary taxpayers and their school-aged children?
Mr. Speaker, I share the honourable member's interest and anxiousness to see an agreement struck between the Calgary Public Board and the local of the Alberta Teachers Association, and not wanting to get in between those important local negotiations, Mr. Speaker. I am informed that the next meeting between the two parties will take place sometime in the last week of August.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's more than a month away. And those with memories of what casual negotiations have done in the past in this context, is the Minister of Education prepared today to contact the parties and use his influence to encourage the negotiators to get on with the job?
Mr. Speaker, I take the honourable member's representation and will make contact with both the board representative on the negotiating side for the board and with the Alberta Teachers Association local president. But I want to underscore, Mr. Speaker, the importance of negotiations taking place between two responsible parties at the local level. There are 150 active school boards in this province, Mr. Speaker, and I believe it is the responsibility of locally elected trustees and the locals of the Alberta Teachers Association working beside and with that Board of Trustees to come to a fair and reasonable agreement. But I appreciate, as I said, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member's representation, and we'll make contact with those appropriate parties.
Thank you. Edmonton Calder, followed by Calgary Buffalo, and then Drumheller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My questions are to the Minister of Family and Social Services. In 1982, this government identified income levels at which parents would be eligible for daycare subsidies and levels at which they would not be eligible, and no adjustment has been made since 1982. Some parents have had to refuse even modest wage increases because their daycare costs would go up so dramatically, and others have quit their jobs and gone on social assistance because they cannot afford to pay the fees. In view of the fact that the income levels warranting assistance in 1982 are far too low for 1989, will the Minister adjust the income eligibility levels so that they are appropriate for 1989?
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to say that it's a matter that I'm looking at right now, and that we hope to be able to make some announcements as it relates to that sometime in the early fall.
The year when? Early fall. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Supplementary to the Minister then. If we continue to hear this, that we have to wait until the fall, and I would ask this Minister, does he recognize the urgency of this issue, and would he move to make a decision and an announcement much sooner than the fall?
Yeah, move it up. Well, Mr. Speaker, I can only say as the new Minister that I have made it a priority, that it was one of the first things that I took the time to address once assuming office, that the member opposite knows full well that we did increase the subsidy rates to low-income families, and I think that was a substantive step in the right direction and a substantive increase, some 20%. And I can only say that I want to make sure that we have all the facts and information, that we don't just jump ahead and make decisions without getting all the knowledge that we should have, and I'm looking forward to having the full information. And once I receive that, I'll make some decisions, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I would bring to the Minister's attention that we've been waiting since 1982. We have all the information. And I would ask this Minister, is he aware that parents are having to quit their jobs to go on social assistance, and many single parents have had to refuse job wage increases because they're waiting to get this certain subsidy levels adjusted?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would only want to add to the comments that I've made already, the commitment to review the situation, the commitment to make some necessary adjustments by September, October, and I would also want to reiterate the commitment and the effort that this government has made over the years towards daycare and making daycare alternatives available. There isn't another province in Canada that actually has a vacancy rate. There isn't another province in Canada that is providing the per capita funding that we place into daycare each and every year. Last year, we committed $68 million to daycare. This year, we've committed $75 million to daycare. Mr. Speaker, clearly this government is committed to helping those single-parent families and other families requiring daycare and other alternatives for their children.
Just a minute. Member for Calgary-Buffalo.
Mr. Speaker, to the provincial treasurer, the government has been hiding the true facts of its strange dealings with the Pocklington and the Gaynors Group for some time now. The press release dated March 3rd of 1988, issued by the government, stated that the $55 million guarantee was part of a package to expand the plant in Edmonton and build a new hog plant. But we now see from the minister's admission that the guarantee related to existing loans. This is really a bailout of Gaynors and its bankers. I'm wondering whether the minister would now be prepared to tell this House what is the amount of the existing liability of Gaynors which is being covered by our guarantee. What's the current amount of the risk of the provincial government under that guarantee?
Mr. Speaker, as we have said repeatedly, about $55 million if you put aside the short-term credit line.
And would the minister then please advise this House how much the province is receiving, whether directly or through one of its numbered companies, in fees or other payments as a result of this $55 million guarantee, and on what basis the fee is calculated?
Mr. Speaker, if he's talking about a fee, the normal fee in a guarantee, subject to confirmation, would be 1/2 of 1%.
Is there, I wonder whether the minister might confirm a statement that the government and its numbered companies are in receipt of the amount of $900,000 per month in respect of the guarantee or some loan aspect relating to the guarantee. Is that or is that not accurate?
Mr. Speaker, this member is obviously fishing for information. He's got a question. I'd be glad to answer it, but I'm not going to try and guess what the point he's making. I've answered every question has been put to me in the House. My colleagues, the Minister of Economic Development, the Minister of Agriculture, have satisfied every question before us, Mr. Speaker, and I can't guess what the member is meaning by his question.
The member for Drumheller, followed by Edmonton Centre. Drumheller, then Edmonton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Honourable Minister of Public Works, Supply and Services. In view of the apparent failure in construction of the Oilfields Hospital at Turner Valley and reported problems at hospitals in Pincher Creek and McGrath, can the minister say if the prototypical hospital design developed by the government and which has been used for many hospitals across the province, including the very worthwhile and successful Valley General Hospital at Strathmore, is in any way responsible?
Absolutely not, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member has raised 3 different hospitals. Last Wednesday in this Assembly, the honourable member from Highwood raised questions with the Oilfield General Hospital, and last Wednesday the Government of Alberta, through myself as the Minister responsible, conveyed an information letter to that particular hospital board that we would be allocating some $275,000 to help them assist in a difficult clay swelling problem that their hospital has been experiencing. In the case of McGrath, 25-bed hospital was completed in McGrath in 1985 at a construction cost of $7.5 million. In early 1987, there was a minor problem which required some remedial work at the total amount of $26,000. In the case of Pincher Creek, a 40-bed active hospital was completed in 1983 at a cost of nearly $13 million. In the spring of 1989, they experienced a sewer backup problem. Remedial work at the estimate cost of approximately $50,000 has been undertaken this spring.
Did the government of Alberta have anything to do with choosing the sites for the hospitals that have experienced these difficulties?
Mr. Speaker, in the province of Alberta, hospital boards, independent hospital boards, appointed or elected at a local level, make a number of decisions with respect to hospital construction. Number one, it is a hospital board that chooses the site for a hospital. It is a hospital board that purchases the land for such a hospital. It is a hospital board that determines the size, the scope of the type of hospital. It is a hospital board that hires the architect and the engineer and hires the contractor. The province of Alberta plays a role in providing funding for the actual construction of the hospital and works hand in hand with those hospital boards, but the procedure that we've always followed in this process, in this province, and one that all hospital boards in the province want us to follow, is that local autonomy be recognized and preserved.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will there be any new procedures implemented to reduce or overcome the structural difficulties experienced by these three hospitals now that the Department of Public Works Supply and Services has taken over the responsibility for hospital construction from the Department of Health?
Well, Mr. Speaker, in the fall of 1988, when the Premier made adjustments to responsibilities by various members of Executive Council, one of those changes in responsibilities occurred in the transfer of responsibility for supervision and involvement in the construction of hospitals from the Department of Health to the Department of Public Works Supply and Services. And what we have done in this department over the last number of months is offered our ability of good offices and expertise to any hospital board in the province of Alberta who want to work hand in hand with the engineers that are currently a part of the government mechanism in the Department of Public Works Supply and Services. And in the last number of months, a number of hospital boards, small hospital boards that don't really have access to the great amount of expertise that a larger hospital board might have in a large urban center, have made use of this availability of information, and the system seems to be working quite well. But I want to underscore, Mr. Speaker, that the province of Alberta will recognize the autonomy of hospital boards throughout this whole process, and we will not force our way into a hospital boardroom to tell the local hospital board what they must do in each and every occasion.
Edmonton Centre, followed by Calgary McKnight.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's been a lot of concern and attention being paid recently to health care of people who have low income who live in the inner city. As well, we've heard from the Solicitor General the fact that he wants to get drinking and driving under control and looking at issues of substance abuse. One of the issues that's currently arising in the city of Edmonton as well as in the city of Calgary is the use of Chinese cooking wine as a beverage that's used by inner city residents and has a very negative health effect. Just wondering of the Minister of Health as she studied this matter and what she can recommend to the Assembly in terms of actions being taken with respect to this issue.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not as aware of the issue as I would like to be before responding to the questions in the House, and I will take them on notice and report back to the honourable member.
So, supplementary answer to that, my department is aware and has been made aware through our police contacts in the department, and there is a regulation in written form now signed by me which will be addressing the matter of Chinese cooking wine, reducing the alcohol content to 20%, which will be controlled by the Alberta Liquor Control Board. The cooking wine we have found to be 40% and creating a serious problem in that area.
Well, is the Minister, Solicitor General, then saying that he's consulted with the Boyle-McCauley Health Centre, the Edmonton City Police, and others in the inner city to remove Chinese cooking wine, which is 40% proof, which is only $2.25 to remove it from the shelves of the grocers in Edmonton?
What I've indicated, Mr. Chairman, is that we will be controlling it, anything above 20%. If there is any wine on the shelves over the 20% amount, then it will be removed.
Mr. Speaker, that doesn't seem to go far enough. I mean, 20% proof can still do a lot of damage to people who use this in a substantive abuse way. And I wonder what criteria it is that the minister is using 20%. What criteria it is that the minister is using the 20% proof and not reducing it even further than that to better enhance the health of people in the inner city.
I suppose, Mr. Speaker, we could remove it completely and then deal with the culture of the Chinese community that make use of this wine. The Alberta Liquor Control Board people have advised the department that we are going to utilize it at 20%, and the same salt content will be there, and it's a matter of salt content in the liquid or in the liquor that happens to make it watered down. By the time they water it, if the same salt content applies to the 20% wine as the 40% wine, by the time they get it watered down where it can be potable, I believe that would likely be somewhere around the beer content.
Calgary McKnight.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the throne speech and budget address, this government stated that education was its highest priority. The plight of Alberta's continuing education programs is a clear indication that the government is failing miserably in meeting this commitment. Organizations like the Grand Centre Regional Education Council provide many benefits to Albertans in communities across the province, and continuing education programs offer adults an invaluable opportunity to participate in non-credit educational enhancement programs. It is an abomination, Mr. Speaker, that the operating grants to these programs have not increased since 1981, and that inadequate funding for administration costs has, in addition to increasing tuition fees, placed these programs in serious jeopardy. My question is to the Minister of Advanced Education. Is the Minister aware that excessive increases in tuition fees for continuing ed programs may discourage Albertans from enrolling in these valuable programs?
Mr. Speaker, there's no question that excessive fees in anything would tend to restrict participation, but it's not the view of the government nor of this department that tuition fees at any of our post-secondary institutions are excessive. Indeed, they're amongst the lowest in Canada.
Mr. Speaker, it seems as though we're heading for full user fees. Is the Minister aware that inadequate administration funding has created a situation whereby the program administrators, of which the majority are female, are continually underpaid for their services, and some of them have offices in their own homes?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is obviously putting forward a question that asks for judgment. I'm not in a position to state that judgment other than to say our department and this government has funded, in our view, adequate funding to carry out continuing education in the various institutions.
Mr. Speaker, I would then ask the Minister to commit today to undertaking a thorough review of further education funding to assure the programs continue and prosper.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the request by the honourable member to have a review, I would point out that we're now entering, even though that we're still in the estimates of the 1989-90 budget, we're entering the process of preparing a budget for 1990-91, and I would assure the honourable member that there's always due diligence given to budget preparation by the department, by the institutions, and certainly by the government.
Calgary Mountain View, followed by Edmonton Whitemud, then Edmonton Gold Bar, if there's time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In answer to my questions on June the 22nd about his contradictory statements regarding a now-defunct chess tournament in Calgary, the Minister of Tourism told the Assembly, "I've asked my department to do a complete file for the House of our involvement and will be tabling that to clear the air and the concerns." Well, Mr. Speaker, virtually a month has gone by since he made that statement in the Assembly, and as each day passes, the air is still not cleared and the concerns just haven't gone away. Will the Minister take the opportunity today to give us a specific date when we can expect him to make public his file, or will he let this matter drag on indefinitely?
Mr. Speaker, the report has been finalized, and our staff are in the presently verifying with all the proponents and getting their approval to allow their documentation to be part and parcel of that report, and we expect that to happen very shortly, and as soon as it's available and approved, I will be tabling or will be filing copies of it for the House as stated.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Tourism, will this file, when it's made public, give the creditors and small business people who have been bilked out of approximately $200,000 an indication of where they can go for redress? Will this report help them?
The question period has expired. Might we have unanimous consent to complete this series of questions? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the file will not address those issues. As we stated earlier in the House, our files were given to the Attorney General's Department, and a legal matter of individual payment of those bills is being discussed between the lawyers and is not part and parcel of my report. We were not responsible for any of those payments as a government, and had no contractual arrangements with outsiders other than the ones that will be in the report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will this report, when it's made public, indicate to the taxpayers how the government intends to recover the money it's lost as a result of the department's careless handling of this matter?
Mr. Speaker, there's many ways. There's a budget that we have to live with, and within. I'm sure that we tackle some projects in a very positive way, anticipating to have success, and we end up with a few failures. So I think, Mr. Speaker, had we not taken a risk in some ventures, we can't gain. To give you an example, Mr. Speaker, under the CATA agreement, we've got some 380-some projects that are successful in moving on, and some $35 million of government funds, both the Alberta government and the federal government funds have been put into it, and that's leveraged some projects, 357 projects, that come up to some $205 million of, some 6-to-1 leveraging. Under the community tourism action planning process, we now have about 120 communities finished, Mr. Speaker. The average goal set and objective set and those are some 30 each. That's 3,600. Out of those projects, we've only spent about $1 million, and that's leveraged $12 million. Undoubtedly, if we keep investing in tourism, Mr. Speaker, those good projects will definitely get our money back time and time again.
Standing Order 40, a request by Edmonton Mill Woods, speaking briefly to the matter.
Well, the urgency for this motion, of course, Mr. Speaker, is that tomorrow is the 10th anniversary of the Nicaraguan Revolution, and I believe that this is an important resolution to many Albertans who have been to Nicaragua and who continue to work on behalf of the development of the people, the resources, the communities of that particular country because of the change in government that has made development possible in Nicaragua. So I would therefore ask for the unanimous support of all members of the House so that we might have a brief debate on this important resolution.
The honourable member for Edmonton Mill Woods has given the request for urgency. Those in favour of this proceeding, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. No. Fails. Orders of the day.